Hello and welcome to another episode of Generating Alpha, a podcast where we explore financial industries and the lives and advice of titans of industry. First of all, we just want to say thank you for everyone tuning in. We have a very special guest today, a legendary investor and commodities trader who has seen global financial markets go from an afterthought to one of the largest industries in the world.
Jim Rogers is a co-founder of the Soros Fund Management and the Quantum Fund, one of the top-performing hedge funds in history. He also is the creator of the Rogers International Commodities Index. He is currently based in Singapore and has a bachelor's from Yale and another in philosophy and politics from Balliol College from Oxford.
Jim was a professor of finance at Columbia Business School and is widely known for his road trips all around the world, both on motorbike and in car.
In this interview, we explore his humble beginnings, his life as an investor, travels around the world, views and beliefs, advice for the younger generation.
We hope you enjoy.
Thank you, and hope you have a great time listening to this episode.
All right, so Jim, we want to start off a little bit, your early years, your childhood. So tell us a little bit about your childhood and how you grew up in Alabama.
Yes, I grew up in a small town in Alabama, very small. My phone number was 5. It was that, and that's not a typo. That was my phone number, 15. And I grew up there and went away to college, and here I am many years later.
Yep. So what are some factors in the childhood that developed into your careers and how it built you in person today?
Well, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life when I was in high school or in university, but quite by accident, I stumbled onto a job on Wall Street and immediately knew this is what I loved, because it was a place where if you knew what was going on in the world and could stay on top of it, they would pay you a lot of money if you got it right.
Yep.
It seemed like heaven to me, because I then realized that's what I loved, knowing the world, knowing what was happening. So everything came together. Before that, I was going to go to medical school and law school and business school and everything else. I was a confused college kid. But then I discovered Wall Street, and here I am.
And before you went to Wall Street, you went to Yale and you went to Balliol College at Oxford, where you rode. So were there anything these environments did that challenged or inspired you? Did these environments make you want to go to Wall Street, or did they do something else for you, especially the rowing?
No, I knew nothing about Wall Street. I knew it was in New York. I knew something bad happened in 1929. I didn't know what really happened in 1929, but I knew it was bad. But then I got to Wall Street and thought this was wonderful. As I say, they would pay me to know what was going on in the world. And if I could get it right, they would pay me a lot. That seemed like heaven to me. So I didn't go to law school. I didn't go to business school. I didn't go to medical school. I went to Wall Street as soon as I could.
All right. So in your book, Street Smart, you really emphasize this objective of teaching your children Mandarin to be bilingual. Has anything that you show them by being bilingual, speaking Mandarin, Chinese, and English, affected their way on they look in life compared to you as a child?
Yeah. What advantages do you think they have speaking both Mandarin and English?
Well, when I went to Wall Street, I didn't know what Mandarin was. We hardly knew what Red China was. Everybody was full of propaganda about Red China and the evil, vicious Chinese. So I knew very little about China at that stage. It's later in life, after I had retired and I started trying to travel around the world, that I learned about China. And then I realized, oh my gosh, China's on the rise again. China is the only country in world history that's been on top 3 or 4 times. They've obviously collapsed 3 or 4 times, but they're the only country that turns around and rises to the top again. No other country's done that. And then I realized, oh my gosh, it's happening again. And so I set out to know more about China. I drove across China a few times. I wanted to learn about China. I would tell everybody that you should teach your children and grandchildren Chinese. Now, of course, in those days, everybody said, no, come on, Japan, Japan, Japan. because Japan was the hot country in the 80s. Now, I mean, everybody knows now, but then it was always Japan, Japan, Japan. We now know that China's on the rise again, whether we like it or not, and here we are.
Yeah.
So you should learn Chinese.
I should, yeah. I should have took Mandarin instead of
Not Spanish, Chinese.
Yeah.
Well,
I know you're learning Spanish in your school, but learn Chinese.
yeah, it's the next big language. And going back a little bit, was breaking into finance kind of hard in those days? Because you talk about in Street Smarts a little bit how it wasn't that big of an industry in those days. Was breaking in easy? And tell us a little bit more about your first job in finance.
Well, my first job in finance was a summer job on Wall Street. And I was essentially, answering. Brokers would write in and say things like, does General Motors pay a dividend? And I would look it up and I would write them back and say, yes, they pay a dividend, and this is what it is. I was a clerk. I mean, I was, a junior clerk at that. And that job was answering queries, answering questions about investing, simple things like, does General Motors pay a dividend, et cetera. And it would, but it taught me enough to know that I was fascinated by whatever this was, whatever this Wall Street stuff was and investing was, it was fascinating. So I didn't go to law school. I didn't go to business school. I didn't go to medical school. I went to Wall Street as soon as I could.
And do you think that going to you studied PP&E at Oxford, and do you think studying PP&E instead of something like business or economics or anything like that gave you some sort of edge? And you look at the world differently through a PP&E lens, or do you think it was kind of a disadvantage?
Well, the answer to that is if you study what you love, you're going to have fun and be successful, whatever it is. If you love painting, study painting. If you love finance, study finance. And that's how you will get ahead in life. And you will be successful, because if people do what they love, they're good at it because they love it so much. So whatever it is, if you love it, do it. Don't listen to people tell you to do something else. Do what you love.
That
And
brings
I
me to
don't
the
know if
idea.
anything gave me an advantage. I just did what I loved.
Yeah. That brings in an idea. When you moved to a quantum fund, you took a 75% pay cut, as you said in the book. But the reason I did it because you love the process they use at quantum. And do you ever had thoughts of what if this doesn't work out? Or did you know that it was going to work out because how much you enjoyed the work you did at quantum?
Well, if I understood you correctly, I will tell you again, if you love photography, become a photographer.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll make a fortune. You'll make an absolute fortune, and you'll have a wonderful life. You'll have a wonderful time. Don't listen to other people. Just do what you love, including photography, if that's what you love.
Yeah, I love that. And before quantum, and even during, what was your first major investment? Do you remember your first major investment, and how did it end up?
Well, yes, I remember my first major investment. I bought a lot of puts because I thought the market was going to collapse. And lo and behold, 4 or 5 months later, the market totally collapsed. Worst collapse in a long time.
Yeah.
Everybody around me was losing their shirt. And here I was looking like a genius. I actually sold my puts on the day the market hit its bottom. I thought, oh my gosh, this is easy. I'm going to be a genius. I'm going to be the next Bernard Baruch.
Yep.
Needless to say, 4 or 5 months later, I lost everything. The market was smarter than I was. It still is smarter than I am. But it was a good start. Taught me a lesson. People lose everything. They commit suicide. They become priests. They do something else. But I didn't want to commit suicide. I didn't want to become a priest. So all I could do was save up and start over, which is what I did. And here I am.
Yeah.
Do you think without that
Resilience, right? Yeah.
without that also without that first investment being successful, because you talk a lot about how even if you're right, the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. So do you think without that, I would say, I mean, I don't know if you would agree, but kind of somewhat lucky market timing, that you would have kept pursuing investments? Would you have said, no, this is not for me, or would you have kept going, you think?
Well, it taught me that there was a lot I didn't know. I mean, I was a genius at my analysis. The companies all went bankrupt and I was selling them short. But unfortunately, I didn't realize that there were a lot of people in the markets who didn't know as much as I knew, and they did all sorts of foolish things. So the market went through the roof. My shorts went through the roof, even though they later went bankrupt. Didn't do me any good because I lost everything first. So I learned there was a lot I didn't know, especially about emotions in the market time, call it what you will. And I realized I had a lot more to learn. I kept at it. I didn't give up. I kept trying to learn and I survived.
Yep. Obviously, Quantum Fund was one of the first hedge funds ever developed. What was really the vision behind it to develop Quantum Fund?
Wait, say that again.
Yeah. How did you develop Quantum Fund, as it obviously was one of the first hedge funds taking a major risk? And what was really your vision behind the goals you had for Quantum Fund?
Well, as I remember, the first hedge fund reputedly was A.W. Jones. It was a long short fund. They took a percentage of the profits. Probably started in 1949, I would say, by a guy named Alfred Winslow Jones, A.W. Jones. By the time the late 60s came along and the 70s came along, more and more people had realized this is a very efficient way to manage money. And so there were a few more hedge funds. Now, of course, everybody in the world wants to be a hedge fund. If you go to an Ivy League school, everybody's starting a hedge fund in her room or in his room because everybody wants to do it. But in those days, there were not very many of them. It is an efficient way to manage money and get paid if you're good at it. And so now, of course, there are many hedge funds. Many people love investing. And if you love it a lot and you're good at it, you should get paid for doing it. And so start a hedge or start a 20% of the profits fund, whether you call it a hedge fund, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Get a percentage of the profits and you'll do well.
And what was the vision when you and Soros started Quantum? What was the vision behind it? What did you want to achieve with Quantum?
Well, we wanted to make money. I mean, we didn't do it, to sell Easter eggs. We wanted to make money. And so we got some investors and we started investing and we took a percentage of the profits and we were successful.
And do you have any particularly memorable experience? Like, what's your favorite story from your time at Quantum or with George?
Well, yeah, I have lots of memories. I have memories of some successes. I have memories of failures. Throughout my career, I have memories of failures. I made many mistakes in my life, I'm happy to say. Fortunately, if you learn from your mistakes, you might survive and do well.
Yep. So, next thing, you're big in commodities. Everyone knows that. What led you to commodities investing, and how do you develop your approach?
Well, everybody has their own approach. I once worked for a guy, he was a very old guy, named Roy Newberger. He had started Newberger Berman, and he was a fabulous trader. I mean, he didn't know much about what the companies did, but he knew every tick in 50 or 100 stocks on the New York Stock Exchange, and he was a spectacular trader. He didn't care what the companies did. It didn't matter to him at all. He knew the stocks, and he could trade the stocks successfully. So everybody has their own approach. his approach was not my approach at all. I needed to know a lot about the companies and try to figure out what the future would be. So there are many ways to make money in the investment world, whether you're a short-term trader or a long-term investor, whatever. Figure out what you do well, figure out what you love, and do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what led you specifically from researching public companies to commodities? What was the inspiration between just going to commodities? Why did you go to commodities?
Well, always, we invested in everything: stocks, bonds, currencies, commodities, all over the world, long and short. Commodities were another thing.
Yeah.
I used to read the commodity page every day in the Wall Street Journal. And most people I found out later didn't even know there was a commodity page in the Wall Street Journal. But I figured out early that I had to know everything or I would not succeed. And commodities are very important. I mean, if you're building power plants, you better know the price of copper, etc.
Yeah.
So I had learned early that everything was important, and I was fascinated by everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hi guys, it's Amir. Hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. At this time, if you haven't followed our podcast or given us a 5-star review already, that'd be very much appreciated. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Sorry about the video not being on. We lost it over the Zoom. We really appreciate it, and thank you for tuning in. Now back to the podcast.
People try to get washed away in other people's strategies and do not really stick to what they used to make money on in the past and try to use a strategy that they don't understand.
Well, whether we like it or not, you have to understand everything in the world because everything has an effect on investments. If you don't know the price of copper, you're going to suffer somewhere. If you don't know the price of wheat, you're going to suffer somewhere. And if you don't know about technology, you're going to suffer somewhere, whether we like it or not. So if you're going to be a successful investor, you need to know about everything or as much as you can, because no matter what's happening in the world, it's going to have an effect on you and your investments.
Yeah.
So I urge you to learn as much as you can about what's happening in the world.
And you're a very prolific traveler, to say the least. And you've traveled extensively around the world. What's one of the most important lessons you've learned during your travels?
Well, yes, I grew up in a small town where my phone number was 5, and many people never leave places like that, which is fine. But I grew up and wanted to see the world. I knew there was a lot more.
Yeah.
So one of my earliest desires was to see the world. So I retired at an early age so that I could see the world. My goal was to go around the world on a motorcycle. Strange. Who has such an absurd desire, goal? But that was my goal. In those days, it was not easy. There was Red China, Soviet Union. You know, the idea of an American American from Wall Street getting on his motorcycle and driving across Red China was pretty absurd. Driving across the Soviet Union was pretty absurd. But that was my goal. I set out to do it. Eventually, I got permission. It took a long time, but it was a crazy idea. But the Chinese eventually said yes. The Russians eventually said yes, and I did it. I wanted to see the world. Now, I'm sure my children someday are going to say, "Oh, I wish you hadn't done that. If you'd stayed working, you'd have a lot more money." But I wanted to see the world, and I did, and I did it.
And were there any important lessons I mean, of course, there were a lot of lessons you took away from it, but do you remember one specific important lesson that you learned that you'd give to us or any other people our age?
Well, perhaps what comes to mind is that we're all the same, no matter whether we're sitting in the steps in Asia or, down in Chicago at the commodities exchanges. We're all the same. We all want the same thing for our children. We all want the same things for ourselves. Now, express it in different ways. Some of us play a lot of golf. Some of us go to work early every morning and invest. Some of us do other things. But underneath, we're all absolutely the same, whether we like it or not. And whether you're living in Illinois or in Uzbekistan, we're all the same.
Yep. So one thing is Americans get caught up in the idea that America is the best. But why do you think that Americans should educate themselves on the rest of the world?
You said America's the best?
No, people think that America is the best. A lot of people that live in America think it is the best. But why do you think that Americans should educate themselves on the rest of the world as you did?
Well, you're exactly right. That is something. Americans think that America is the best country that ever was. But many countries think that. If you travel enough, I mean, there are people in Australia, people in Germany who think that their country is the best. And most countries have something good going for them. But I'm not sure any country is the best because all of us make mistakes and every country makes mistakes. But my goal was to find out. So I went to see them all to find out who was doing good things and who was doing bad things. And I'm still keen to see as much of the world as possible. And I can assure you that everybody makes mistakes, but also everybody makes triumphs. So if you can learn, please learn as much about the world as possible. And if you're going to be an investor, it will help you in your investments as well. The more you know, the better investor you will be.
And that leading directly into our next question, how specifically did your travels shape your view on global investing?
Well, one of the first things I learned was, oh my gosh, we're all the same. You know, some people put their money into commodities. Some people put their money into farming. But everybody wants to be successful. Everybody wants to make money. Everybody wants to be rich, and everybody wants their children to be better off. So that is one of the things I learned. And what I learned, I guess, was that the people who really love what they're doing are more likely to be successful at it than the rest of us. Yes, we can all wake up every day and read the Wall Street Journal, but that's not going to make us successful because there's more to it than just that. And that's one of the things I learned early, as I mentioned to you before, you have to know about timing as well. Well, timing is a part of investing, whether we like it or not. But there are lots of things you need to learn. You need to learn about the price of copper because the price of copper affects a lot of things, whether it's electricity or automobiles. You need to know all this stuff. And it's not easy. I wish it were easy. Wouldn't it be easy if we could be lucky?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, I wish I could be lucky. I wish I could have good luck. I might be really rich.
Yeah. What is one piece of advice that you would give to yourself, say when you were like our age, 16, 15, and how do you give that advice to your children that are a little younger than us right now?
Well, when I was your age, I didn't know what Wall Street was. I guess I knew it was in New York. I guess I knew something bad happened in 1929. Maybe I knew that. I don't even know if I knew that when I was 15 or 16. I learned, obviously, I went to college and all that stuff. So I learned a lot about the world, but no, I didn't know anything. If somebody had said to me, do what you love, I don't think I would have known what they were talking about because I didn't know what I loved. I didn't know anything. I knew very little about myself. And most young people don't know much about themselves. It's not easy to learn about yourself and what your passions are, but if you can learn, and you should learn one way or the other, and that's probably the best and first lesson, learn what you love, figure out your own passions, and that's what you should pursue. If you want to be a farmer, everybody's going to laugh at you and say, wait, we didn't educate you to become a farmer. If you want to be a farmer, be a farmer. Don't listen to them. follow your own passions.
One thing is, a lot of high schoolers today focus on one thing. Like, do you think to find one's true passion, should people try to experience every single thing they can when they're this young to find what they actually want to do in their life?
Well, if you have 6 passions, pursue them all, but you're probably not going to be quite as successful because you're going to scatter your efforts. Yes, I will repeat, if you can figure out your passion, and if you have 2 or 3 passions, that's okay. But try to focus. Don't scatter yourself too thin, because it's difficult to be successful if you're trying to do everything.
Yeah. And I guess this time in like me and Owen's life and in high school is a time for us to kind of explore everything. Because we don't know from birth what our passion is. We kind of have to explore everything and discover it.
Well, yes, that's one thing that you can do in high school that you should do, but it's later that you will be able to focus and learn more because you will have more experience and more knowledge of yourself and more knowledge of the world.
Of course.
High school is great. You'll learn a lot, but it's more likely that you will learn in depth later more things, and it will be easier to know what you really love.
And did you have any important mentors in your life?
I cannot think of any that come to mind. I'm sure I must have. I'm sure I learned from some people. There were some smart people that I knew. There were there were dumb people I knew. So you can sometimes learn as much from the dumb people as from the smart people. So don't ignore the dumb people. Just watch what they do. Because if they make mistakes, you'll learn. I hope you'll learn from their mistakes.
Yeah, let other people make mistakes for you.
Yeah. So one thing is, what is your investment process looking like?
I'm sorry, what is my what?
What does your investment process look like today?
My investment.
What is your investment process today? Do you still use the same process you used like 25 years ago?
Well, yes and no. Yes, I certainly need to know about a lot of things. I certainly need to know about the price of agricultural products, and I always learned that at an early age. And so I do know what's happening to the price of oil and other things. So I guess in that sense, I'm still doing what I've always done, but of course, things change. Australia is an important country and producer of a lot of things now, but I probably didn't know what Uzbekistan was back then, and it probably didn't matter so much. Now I know about Uzbekistan, and I invest in Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
But there was a time in my life when I didn't know anything about Uzbekistan, and I didn't invest there. The world is always changing.
And tell us a little bit more about Uzbekistan and your conviction, because it's a country you're quite bullish on in recent months and years.
Well, I am extremely bullish on Uzbekistan these days, for what it's worth. It doesn't mean I know what I'm doing, but you will find, if you do a little research, that Uzbekistan at one time was one of the most successful countries in the world. There was a guy named Tamer, became known as Tamerlane. He went lame, and so he became known as Tamerlane. He was extremely successful conqueror, conquered a lot of the world, and did extremely well. And Uzbekistan was a country which conquered a lot of Asia and all the way from Europe to Japan.
Yeah.
So it had a good success. Most people never heard of Uzbekistan now, but it is a place that you should know about. And if I'm right, it's a place where you can invest now.
Yeah. And when investments are losing, there's a time where you kind of have to decide whether you cut your losses and whether you kind of give up or whether you ride it out. How do you decide whether this is not really for me anymore, I don't have that much conviction, or do you just let it ride out?
Well, I wish I had a good answer to that. Many people I know use stop losses, You know, they will say if it goes down 12%, I'm out.
Yeah.
And there are people who are successful at that. Everybody has to figure out their own way. I wish I had a good answer. I mean, my pathetic answer usually is I just take the pain until I realize, oh, I made a bad mistake, and finally take the loss. I wish I had a simple answer.
So you've been really in the past, you've been really focused on the downfall of the United States as a major global power and the rise of China. Do you still believe in those views today?
With the rise of China, yeah, I mean, I look out the window. You know, China's the only country in world history that's been on top 4 or 5 times. I mean, Rome was great once, Britain was great once, Egypt was great once, but China's been on top 4 or 5 times. They've collapsed 4 or 5 times. But for whatever reason, they're the only country that after they wallow around at the bottom for a while, they rise to the top again.
Do you know why?
I don't have an answer as to why. I don't know why. If you can figure out why, don't tell anybody. Just send me an email. I want to know too. If we can figure that out, we'll all be much better off. But China's rising again.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not.
And other than China, what do you see as the next big change in the next decade?
Well, that's a good question. If you can figure that out, you'll be rich.
Yeah.
You can drop out of high school and get rich.
But in your opinion, of course.
Yeah.
Well, again, what do I know? I know what I see some of the things I think. I told you, I see the rise of China.
Yeah.
I see the change in agriculture. I mean, agriculture has been pretty pathetic for a long, long time. I doubt if any of your classmates want to be farmers, which means they probably should be farmers. You know, the world is going to continue changing. And what we have to do, no matter what, is to figure out the change and then pursue it. Yeah. And in your case, you need to figure out what you love and pursue that. And because eventually that will help you become very successful. And whether it is the great new trend or not, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you love farming, be a farmer. Yeah. Don't listen to anybody else.
And you're very big on agriculture being kind of the next finance, the next big industry. So why do you think agriculture is the next big thing?
Well, wait, I didn't say that. Did I say that? I didn't know I said it if I said it.
It was insinuated in your book that you think agriculture will be a growing industry.
Yeah.
Well, agriculture has been a disaster, of course. And whenever you find a disaster, especially if it's something the world needs and it changes, you'll probably be very successful. So, yeah, I do expect agriculture to get better now.
Yeah.
Go to your high school and look around your classmates. None of them want to be farmers. They all want to be stockbrokers. They all want to be baseball players. So, no. But if you can figure out where the world is going, you'll be very successful, especially if you love it.
You've been clearly in your past in your books about criticizing central bank policies. What are your current concerns about the global and U.S. monetary policy?
Well, the main thing that's, unfortunately, central banks in much of the world now think that the easy way is to print money. If there's a problem, just print some more money and everything will be okay. I've been around long enough and I've read certain enough history to know that money printing may be a temporary solution to something, but it's in the end, it's not good. Debasing currencies, there are very few countries that have become successful by debasing the currency.
Yeah.
Very few. So it's an easy solution, but it's rarely a successful solution in the long term.
Do you think that is a major reason why the U.S. is falling off as a country currently?
Well, it's hand in hand with huge debt. I mean, the U.S. has become the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. You know, 30 or 40 years ago, the U.S. was a creditor nation. hard to believe, but the U.S.
Yeah.
was a creditor nation up until, I think, 1987 or something, when we became a debtor nation again. And our debts are skyrocketing. Our debts are actually staggering now. So your lives are going to have many, many problems because the U.S. is a gigantic debtor. 100 years ago, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. 50 years later, they were bankrupt because they kept spending and borrowing and spending and borrowing. And they literally went bankrupt. The IMF had to bail them out. That could happen to the U.S. It's happened to everybody else. Yep. So if it happens, you guys are going to have many problems in your lives. Yep. My children will have many problems in their lives as the U.S. goes down.
Yeah, and to kind of finish it off, it's been great to have on the podcast. And one last question to kind of finish it off. What is one question you rarely get asked that you think you should be?
A hot tip. Everybody wants a hot tip. I don't think you should ask that question, but that's the one question that everybody wants to ask. You know, just give me one hot tip.
Yeah.
You don't have to give me 6, just one.
Yeah.
I just want one. I just want to get rich this month. Well, everybody wants to be rich this month, but I will tell you, please ignore hot tips. Stay away from hot tips. Hot tips will ruin you. Hot tips are easy and everybody wants them. But if I told you to buy X and you bought it and it went up, you wouldn't know what to do because you don't know why you bought it.
Yeah.
You don't
understand. Went down, you wouldn't know what to do because you don't know why you bought it.
Yeah.
So the best advice I can give you is only invest in what you yourself know a lot about.
Yeah.
And stay away from hot tips.
So
yeah, nobody's ever gotten rich by copying other people's trades or getting tips or anything like that.
Yeah.
I will leave it to you, but I will tell you nobody ever got rich on hot tips.
Yeah.
All right.
And if you can find a guy who got rich on hot tips, a year later he was broke.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Jim. It's been a very enjoyable conversation. Thank you for coming on in the morning at your time, and we really appreciate it.
I hope you have a great day.
It's my pleasure. Just be careful. Be careful. It's not easy.
Yeah.
I assure you. Everybody tells you it's easy, but it's not easy.
Yep.
And don't count on luck, because luck's not going to save you.
Yeah. All right. Have a great day, Jim.
Have a great
Thank you
day.
for coming on.
And if you